This episode of the Rise Up podcast features Mary Templeton, President and CEO of Michigan Saves. Nick and Amanda spoke with Mary about green banks and how innovative financing can incentivize private investment and accelerate the transition to clean energy.
Mary, you are the president and CEO of Michigan Saves, the nation's first nonprofit green bank. Can you give us an overview of how Michigan Saves started, what you do, and what you've seen happening with green banks in the U.S. since you were founded?
I would be delighted to. Thanks so much for having me here today. As the leader of Michigan Saves, Michigan's and the nation's first nonprofit green bank, I have the honor of working with a really committed, resourceful, high-energy team to tackle some of the most interesting, meaningful, and really challenging problems facing our state. Our mission is to stimulate and support investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy systems in Michiganders' homes, businesses, and public buildings. We were formed in 2009 with a grant from the Michigan Public Service Commission. That was at the time in 2008, actually, the year before we got the grant. Michigan passed some sweeping energy legislation. It was the first energy legislation that Michigan passed in quite some time, and it required the utilities to meet energy efficiency targets and renewable energy targets. If you recall 2008, 2009, it was a really tough time. We were in the middle of a recession, and there was an acknowledgement that both residential utility customers and commercial customers needed to have a way to make those improvements in their homes and their businesses. And so the Michigan Public Service Commission created the notion of a financing entity that would break down barriers to people making those improvements in their homes and businesses. Michigan was really forward-looking when we created us. It was before green banks even existed. And part of the grant was to conduct research and stakeholder outreach. We had about $6 million in a trust fund of sorts for financing. And we knew we wanted to serve the entire state of Michigan, and that money would not go very far unless we leveraged the private market. So with our stakeholder outreach and our research, we talked to lenders and contractors and utilities, state employees, businesses, residents. And what we found was that there were contractors that existed to do the work, and there were lenders who really wanted to lend, but there was nobody putting it together into a program that really met the needs of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And so that was the impetus for Michigan Saves, and that's how we were created. And that's what we do. We put together the private market with the contractors and the lenders to really help break down those barriers to people doing work in their homes and businesses. Since 2009, since we issued our first loan in 2010, we've served close to 26,000 home and business owners, and we've supported more than $325 million in clean energy financing with programs that are really easy, affordable, and accessible. We're really proud of that work to attract that private capital, support local clean energy jobs, reduce carbon emissions, and protect our state's really beautiful natural resources.
Wow, absolutely. And I think that, forward thinking is really something that comes to mind talking way back in 2008. I know that a lot of these topics are getting a lot more traction in the last few years. So it's amazing to see that you've all been around for that long, kind of spearheading this. Kind of piggybacking on that last question, I'm wondering if you could expand on the role that Michigan Saves plays in energy efficiency and clean energy financing in the state of Michigan, and then how specifically you are working to help increase access to energy efficiency and renewable energy for Michiganders.
Yeah, we have a really big role in energy efficiency and clean energy financing. We bring together the private lenders, the utilities, the contractors, and then the individuals as they embark on their energy journeys. We partner with the lenders, and the lenders are willing to offer better rates, longer terms, and more access to people who would not otherwise qualify potentially for traditional credit. And kind of the magic that we bring is from the investment that the state and then the federal government did make in us, where we use these investments or this credit enhancement or the trust fund to back the lenders in case of default. And we don't eliminate the risk. So the lenders still take on some of the risks. So we don't guarantee it, but we share the risk. And so it mitigates it so that those lenders are able to offer more expansive programs with more access. And in some cases, it allows us to offer loan payments that are paid for through the monthly utility bill savings. And it's still a financial decision for many businesses and individuals. And when we can make that financing so accessible with the terms, with the rates, with the open access, where people can pay for that loan, that improvement through their energy savings, that just opens up all kinds of possibilities.
Mary, yeah, we've been obviously really impressed with the work of Michigan Saves, and we think, as Amanda mentioned, this is a really timely topic. One area in particular, and one strong justification for Green Bank, is to increase access specifically to the low to moderate income households and financing in financially struggling census tracts. So I'm wondering, in your work, and as you've explained, of kind of increasing access and reducing payments and like really targeting those cash flow positive investments, have you seen with Michigan Saves real progress in increasing access?
We really have. Our residential program, which represents about 75% of the work that we do at this stage. We did an analysis a couple of years ago where we looked at which census tracts were receiving the loans. And we found that 56% of the loans that were originated were in low to moderate income census tracts. So more than half of the loans that we have issued since the beginning of our time are in low to moderate income census tracts. And so we're really, really proud of that. I can tell you that while we're really proud of that, there's still a lot more work to do. We don't approve every single loan that is applied for. We'd like to get to the point where we do offer loans for every single person who wants to make a really intensive, sometimes expensive investment in energy efficiency or renewable energy. So there are some other programs that we have stood up in a couple of cities that have allowed us to provide access to additional folks who don't qualify under the credit criteria that we have on our residential program. But that's work that we're absolutely committed to continuing to expand, and we'd like to do more of.
You're listening to the Rise Up Midwest podcast. We'll get back to the podcast after the short sponsor break. Want to increase sales on every project? Now offer homeowners best-in-class solar and battery storage in one high-powered bundle, all from one company you know you can trust. Panasonic's new Evervolt series solar panels are available in up to 380-watt models and work with their Evervolt battery storage to deliver the total home energy system. Plus, back your work with a complete 25-year solar warranty guaranteed by one of America's most trusted brands, Panasonic. And now, back to the podcast.
So as you've mentioned, and kind of in our experience and research, we understand Michigan Saves that you've managed programs and partnerships with Michigan Public Service Commission, a variety of electric utilities in the state, other lenders, cities and villages, even, a project with the U.S. Department of Energy. When you look back on kind of all of the programs that you've managed, what in specific are some of the more successful programs, and what, in your opinion, has made them so successful?
So one of my favorites, and maybe it's just because it's the way it was my first exposure to Michigan Saves, but certainly one of my favorites is that when Michigan Saves was just launching, it was early in 2010, mid-2010, the state of Michigan won a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. It was an ERA grant. It was a $30 million grant. And the state of Michigan was one of the largest grant recipients in that program. And the intention of that grant was to create an energy efficiency, clean energy market in Michigan that would last long after the grant. Michigan Saves was the fiduciary on behalf of the state of Michigan, and our job was to create the program, work with partners all around the state, cities, townships, the state of Michigan, nonprofits, lenders, contractors. It was a really, really comprehensive program that worked really from kind of Michigan's shore to shore. And it was hard. It was a lot of work, especially when we were standing up an organization. And so the analogy that we used a lot of times is that we were building the plane as we were flying it. We had to act fast. We had a 3-year time frame within which to spend $30 million and leverage another $150 million of private investment around the state. And again, in the middle of a recession. So really, really hard work. But I can tell you the way that everybody collaborated and cohesively worked together with a unilateral mission to create this marketplace for energy efficiency and renewable energy was super inspiring. I've met some of the most devoted, intelligent, just really, really kind of fun people through that whole process. And I'm really proud of that work. And one of the things that I think puts Michigan a little bit apart from, and there were many other states that also won the grant who are doing really good things still, but we did a very, very nice job of setting things up so that our work could be sustained long into the future. And like I said, that was one of the intentions, is to kind of create this marketplace. We didn't do everything right. We learned an awful lot from it, but we did set up Michigan Saves to exist long into the future, as well as many other nonprofits and contractors and other organizations that are doing very good work. And all of these organizations continue to grow. We continue to deepen our work in all over the state, but especially in disenfranchised communities. And we're working really, really hard to make an equitable energy solution accessible for all. And I think that's really inspiring.
It's absolutely inspiring. I wanted to ask, in that question answer you had mentioned, you didn't do everything right, and none of us do, and we're trying to fly by the seat of our pants. Wondering if you could expand upon some of those lessons that you all have learned, and what advice you would give to other states and entities that are working to put programs like this out in their own areas.
Mm-hmm.
Or what you do differently, if you could go back.
There's probably a whole book that we could write, Amanda, about that. And we did do a pretty comprehensive final report that shows some of those lessons learned. But just kind of off the top of my head, one of the things that I think we learned really, really kind of viscerally in that process was we did an awful lot of outreach into communities all over the state, and they were diverse, they were different, they each had their own needs. And when we first got started, we developed programs as kind of a core team who was running the grant. And when we went into those neighborhoods, people didn't trust us. It was sometimes too good to be true. And they didn't trust that the offer, because we were giving them pretty good offers. We were paying for a good portion of their insulation and their air sealing and audits and HVAC equipment and solar panels. And we were offering financing that was sometimes 0% for 10 years. And they're just like, no, this is a government program and I don't trust you, and who are you and why are you knocking on my door? And so over time, we ended up doing a much, much better job of engaging those communities in the development of the program and in the outreach. And I remember one really, really effective outreach program that we did in the city of Grand Rapids, managed by some of the outreach coordinators in the city of Grand Rapids. And We used the community nonprofits and the staff from that community and actually people in the neighborhood to be the ambassadors. We paid them for that work. And that was one of our most successful outreach efforts. And I think that's a lesson learned that we've carried forward and that we want to continue to do even more so. And I think other green banks can, and other organizations that are looking to do outreach into various communities can do much more effectively.
That's a very experienced and, I guess, wise lesson to learn there. And to bring it down to that individual customer lens, with a state like Michigan that has a Michigan Saves and a state like Illinois who's looking to develop one, can you kind of clearly define what benefits a customer, electric customer in Michigan has because they have a green bank as opposed to, say, someone in Wisconsin who is yet to have one?
We feel really fortunate that Michigan has a green bank and we have one that has existed for over a decade. It's really hard to make the math work in Michigan without an organization like ours. It's so important to, for example, small businesses that have been struggling to survive during the pandemic. We had one business, for example, it was a restaurant in the city of Detroit, tell us that without the savings from his energy project way back in 2012, he would not have survived COVID. And if it is hard for these businesses who have a lot of different ways that they can spend their money, if it's hard for them to make these type of energy improvements because they have to source their own capital or because the capital is so expensive that those investments don't pay for it themselves, people just won't do it. And that's a real, that's a shame for those states that don't have financing that kind of pays for itself. And that the structure that we have in Michigan is something that I think that other green banks can learn from, where we do leverage that private capital, but that loan loss reserve and that credit enhancement it really is the magic that allows those lenders to approve more loans, to lengthen the terms, because then you can use the energy savings to pay for those loan payments, and to provide more access at low interest rates. On the residential side, a good portion of our work occurs when a piece of equipment breaks, and of course, it's typically on the coldest day of the winter or the hottest day of the summer. And if we didn't exist, people would have to pay for these unplanned expenses on expensive credit cards, or, tap their savings if they have it, or borrow money from some other source. And oftentimes they won't choose the most efficient and long-term beneficial option. But with us, they can, because it's affordable, there's no out-of-pocket costs, and they can pay for it over a long period of time.
You're listening to the Rise Up Midwest podcast. We'll get back to the podcast after the short sponsor break. Today's episode is brought to you by Energy News Network. From the Midwest and beyond, the Energy News Network provides daily updates on the transition to a clean energy economy. Sign up for any of their free daily regional newsletters at energynews.us. And now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, that becomes a critically important facet of this kind of transition to carbon neutral or cleaner energy grid. That context that basically the grid is a few very big machines, powering many, many small machines. And now many of those small machines are producing power. And so we're transitioning into the distribution system. And when something breaks, as you mentioned, that decision in purchasing that new machine, if you just purchase another natural gas or inefficient machine, there's a bunch of embodied future energy in there that it's impossible to replace. You've just locked in that energy use. And so the concept of a green bank of reducing financing is critically important to the transition. So I want to just make note of the importance of what you said there. You're there when something breaks, and that's a critical response. On that note, one of the things that we've been really inspired by as far as financing goes, especially when it comes to low to moderate income ratepayers, is on-bill financing, because you're not layering more debt onto the customer. You're actually just layering an asset purchase onto the utility bill in a cash flow positive manner. And in the partnership with the utility, that becomes an interesting proposition and brings a whole new partner into there. And Michigan Saves has done, as far as I know, at least two, with Holland Board of Public Works and Traverse City Power and Light. Would you talk about on-bill financing and how you've been involved and kind of what you see as the future?
Yeah, we love working with cities like Holland and Traverse City to help them stand up their on-bill program. When I spoke earlier about our residential program, I mentioned that we don't approve all of the applicants because we work with the private lending market and we work with credit unions who have really, really stepped up. However, they still use a credit-based model to approve those loans. And so there's probably 25% of the applicants that are not able to get the financing. However, with on-bill financing, one of the ways that we've worked with Traverse City and Holland is that we use on-time bill payment history as the underwriting criteria. So in each of these cities, they've set it up so that they look at 12 months of on-time bill payment history, and that is the way that they approve the financing. So the complementary kind of off-bill program and the city's on-bill program, between both of those, we can approve pretty much anybody who is doing this work. So that's super, super exciting for us and for these cities. Both of these cities are really, they're committed to their climate action goals. They're progressive cities and they've done a lot of work along that front. As a matter of fact, Holland was the city that got the legislation for municipal utilities passed several years ago. I think it was in 2014 to do on-bill financing. And so they're definitely leaders and they committed a lot of time and resources to get this program set up. They engaged the community really, really well to launch this program. One of the things that they were really clear about when they set up their program is they wanted the program to be effective for those who were doing deep energy retrofits. And one of the aspects of the legislation is that an audit is required. So it isn't always going to work for one of those break-fix situations. However, it does allow those that are interested in understanding what's going on in their home and mapping out a plan for how to get to net zero or just really be as efficient as possible. So it helps with the education and the planning. And one of the things that we've seen is that in these programs, the average number of measures that people install at one time is probably at least 2 times, maybe even 3 times what we see in the unsecured program. So they are doing that deep energy work. They're financing it over, for Traverse City, 10 years, for Holland, 15 years, really accessible rates. In Holland, it launched in 2016, so we're about 5 years in. They've financed over 130 projects for about over $2 million. Traverse City, it's only coming up on our first year, not even one whole year, and they've done about 4 projects, so just getting launched at about $50,000. But we're really excited about these programs. We love partnering with them, and we've been speaking. One of the things that I should mention too is that Holland did kind of the hard work of getting the first one launched. And when Traverse City launched, we were able to reuse much of the work that Holland did. And Traverse City was really amenable to that. Of course, it's a good program, so they copied a lot of it, but it helped us reduce the costs and get it launched that much more quickly. So we do see that as a benefit to other utilities as they explore this. We're talking to anyone who is interested in doing this, both on the residential side and the commercial side, and we do see an opportunity for those programs to expand over the course of the next several years.
I have one final question for you, and it's slightly off topic, but also something that I find very interesting to talk about with individuals. You are a founding board member and still on the advisory board of Advancing Women in Energy, and you also previously served on the Michigan Women's Commission. Can you speak to your own career trajectory and how you got into the green financing space? And then also what motivates your dedication to supporting women both in energy and in Michigan in general?
Yeah, this is kind of a fun topic to talk about. I really have benefited from a great career with a lot of responsibility, hundreds of staff, a global reach. At one point, I had an amazing experience. I moved my whole family to Australia and lived there for a year and a half to open up a branch office for a technology company. And so I've definitely had a really good career experience. And in 2008, I was downsized from a position in the automotive industry. It was a real blow to my ego, and I had to grapple with a deep, deep sense of failure after the career trajectory that I experienced. And it was really painful. As I look back, though, it was a defining moment for me that led me to question what I really wanted from my career. I was 47 at the time. I had more than a decade of work left in me, which also means that I realized that I only had a certain amount of time left in my professional career. And I wanted to do something more meaningful and more purposeful. My sister is an architect, and she introduced me to leadership and energy efficient design. She was a real advocate for any kind, net zero energy efficiency, renewable energy. She inspired me to look into this industry. And also at the time, the state of Michigan was under Governor Jennifer Granholm was really focused on creating more jobs in the clean energy space. So those two kind of matched. And with a lot of grace and a lot of support from others, I eventually made my way to the job leading the US DOE program that I spoke of earlier, which led me to my current role. The other part of your question was what motivates me to supporting women in energy and in Michigan. I grew up in a family with 9 kids, 5 girls, 4 boys, and we shared equally in the chores. We had a lot of chores. The boys baked and cleaned and cooked, and the girls mowed the lawn and trimmed trees and painted windows. And while that's not novel by any stretch of the imagination, back in the 60s, it wasn't as common as it is now. And I always felt that I had a sense of gender equality, that it should exist from a really early age. But as I entered the professional world, I realized that was not always the case. And so as I grew in my leadership positions, developed my skills, experienced my own development and coaching, whenever I could offer insights, support, or encouragement to women, I took the chance to do so. I feel really privileged and fortunate to have had the space and the resources, the sense of belonging, and the safety to explore my own personal growth and development. And I've benefited from the wisdom and the coaching and the mentoring and the coaching that I've had over the years. And while I've enjoyed my volunteer board roles focused on advancing women, what I really enjoy most is the personal connection and supporting women on their own journeys to embrace their own vulnerability and to work with a clear sense of authenticity. And I believe that people thrive when they can bring their whole beings, their whole selves to their professional lives and their personal lives. And when people thrive, organizations thrive, families thrive. And to me, that's so inspiring.
I took two big key points from that. One is that you gave props to your sister for inspiring you, and then you gave props to your parents for raising you with that gender equality mindset. So shout out to your family for sure. And then two, I completely agree with the women supporting women and the importance of that. So thank you.
Well, it definitely is apparent to us that not only Michigan Saves benefits from your leadership, but and not only the homes and businesses that get the financing, but as you mentioned, all of Michigan's residents, because when you reduce the need to build new energy, you reduce energy rates, and energy costs are a burden on states' productivity and health and wealth and happiness. And so you've been an inspiration. We really appreciate the time. Where can people go to learn more about Michigan Saves and stay connected with your work?
It has been my absolute pleasure to talk to you today. If anyone wants to learn more, whether you're a Michigander or if you're looking to just learn more about what we do, or a contractor or a lender who wants to get involved, you can find all kinds of information at michigansaves.org, michigansaves.org. We also have an email, info@michigansaves.org, that people can send requests to, or there's a phone number that you can reach out to, 517-484-6474. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you.
This Rise Up podcast was hosted by Nick Hyla and Amanda Schenebeck. Editing and sponsor copy read by Matthew Brown. Led by the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Rise Up Midwest is a coalition of individuals, businesses, and organizations working to build support for common sense clean energy policy and market development. For past episodes and to sign up for new episode alerts, visit riseupmidwest.org. The Rise Up podcast is provided for educational purposes. Views expressed by guests and MREA employees are their own and do not imply endorsement by the Rise Up Midwest Coalition or the MREA.